Hello, everybody, and Happy New Year. By the time you hear this podcast, it will be after January 1st. So this is going to be our first podcast of the new year, episode 53. And so Happy New Year's, Han.
Yeah, same to you. Same to you. We haven't passed the new year yet when
we haven't as we're recording, but when you're listening, we will have. So that's the wonderful time warpy thing about podcasting. Yeah. And which is good because we're going to have a time warpy kind of TV special in February, which we'll talk about a bit in the news. But you had a good Christmas?
I did.
Great.
A lot of family and friends and a lot to eat. And we actually got snow today on the 22nd, 27th.
We've had snow since near the end of November, so it's not a big deal for us. Though here on the east coast of where I've used to be from, on Ontario, and that they're like breaking heat wave records there. Like they're up in the 15, 16 degrees, which is very unusual for them as well. But
it's
strange
it's actually
times.
the same here. We usually have about 5 or 10 degrees below zero now.
Right.
And right before the snow, we had around 10 plus. So.
Wow. How come we missed out on it? Everybody else seems to be having this nice weather, but I did see in Texas they were having tornadoes and stuff, which was kind of bizarre for this time of year. I think even for them. So
yeah.
Very strange. Anyhow. Yes. After 2 big podcasts in December, and the second one, of course, which we dealt with the whole latest Dark Tower casting, things are settling down a bit now. We're going to get back more into the rhythm of typical things that we report on. Of course, we're going to give you the news, and we are going to finish off with our review of the final season of Haven. And as well, we're going to discuss the back half of short story in the Bazaar of Bad Dreams collection that was released earlier this year. So, With all of that, welcome to another year with us. Hopefully we're going to have a lot of fun doing that. But now we're going to go to the news. Welcome. Do not fear the door that lies before you. We will protect you. We are your guides, Hans and Lou, and we will give you the latest in Stephen King news. But before we do so, you must prove yourself worthy. You must open the door and join us in the death room. The first item up, and you can see a lovely picture of this over at Hans's site, is the Bill Hodges trilogy will be released as a 3-book collection in a nice slipcase, and the back covers form a nice happy face icon with jagged teeth, I guess you could say, or shark teeth or something, or saw teeth. It looks like a nice set, but I've already bought the other 2 books, and I'm buying the 3rd book, so this might be a gift for me later down the road, but I don't have any immediate plans to get this. What about you, Hans?
No, I have the first 2 books as well, and I will be getting the 3rd one. But it was no surprise that this one was coming. I mean,
yes.
It's very common, and I like that they give them similar look, because they broke that little with the 3rd book now. The covers aren't really connected anymore. The 2 first have very similar covers, and with the 3rd one they are going in a different way, which I think is a bit sad, because I liked the first 2 covers.
Mm-hmm.
But here it sounds like they are, at least on the back, giving them the same look, so that is nice.
Yeah, we don't know if that's just the spine, or is that part of the actual bookcase itself? It's hard to tell. The sleeve, I mean.
Yeah, I think it's the spine.
Yeah, so the books themselves might look the same, but you would think if they're doing a 3 books in one set, they would at least give you different covers to distinguish this set from just the regular publications. But I guess we'll have to see. But we don't have pictures of what it looks like on the inside, so we're just kind of guessing as well.
Yeah, maybe they could, if they aren't doing special books, if they just repack the 3 first books, maybe you could get the box itself for a lower price and then put your books in it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Could be a nice way to collect them.
Yeah, well, I know Cemetery Dance does that occasionally with book sleeves, but
Yeah.
I don't know if this is from the publisher, so I don't know if they're going to do that as well. That would be kind of nice if you could.
Yeah.
Get the sleeve separately or the case separately from the books, but maybe on eBay or something you might see it pop up there.
Yeah, you can get everything on eBay, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All
Yeah,
right.
we know that the total page count is 1,344 pages of Bill Hodges' history.
Yes, and that will be available on June 7th. I'm sorry, I didn't mention that earlier.
Yeah, same day as the third book is released.
Yep. And they're, of course, accepting pre-orders. If you have any money left over from Christmas, go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Next up is the TV series of 2016, or maybe there'll be more, I don't know. But this one is the first one at least. 11/22/63, and the first news is that we have a second teaser for it, which I think look pretty cool because everything is rewinding, moving backwards. So that one you can check out on my site if you haven't already. And we also have the titles and length of the episodes for all but the last one. So the 7 first titles we have, and they are The Rabbit Hole, The Kill Floor, Other Voices, Other Rooms, The Eye of Texas, The Truth, Happy Birthday, Lee Harvey Oswald, and Soldier Boy. And the episodes themselves, except the first one, they are between 44 and 54 minutes. And this is not counting the commercials. And the first episode is 1 hour and 22 minutes. So that's a little longer. We don't know exactly if the last episode will be a longer episode or if it will be a regular episode, like the episode 2 to 7.
Yeah, I would guess it would be longer like the first one.
Yeah.
And if this is on Hulu Plus, it'll be interesting to see how many commercials. If I don't know how Hulu does it, because the episode ranges are quite different, right? You know, you're going from like 44 to 57, 54. That's quite a range.
54, yeah.
So
yeah,
that's quite a range.
Yeah, and I don't know, is there a commercial on Hulu? I don't know.
I don't know.
The channel isn't here in Sweden, so I don't know how it works.
Mm-hmm. I think if it's on regular Hulu, but I think you have to be on Hulu Plus, so I don't know how they would do it, but probably commercials at the beginning. But It's interesting that the thing that jumps out with me because of the variance in episode lengths, this is not something you typically would see if it was a show done for TV. The episode lengths would pretty well be locked at 42 to 44 minutes.
Yeah.
For each episode. So hopefully these are done tailored to this portion of the story that they're doing, which means that there won't be any unnecessary filler, which sometimes we can drag a show down. So this to me is a good sign.
Yeah. And well, I can let you know that I have actually seen the 7 first episodes. And while I can't tell you anything about them, I can say that I like them so far. So it looks good for February.
Good. And when do you get to see the 8th? You have to wait till it actually airs.
No, I'm hoping this coming week.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Well, you'll have to give us a slight update next podcast then. So that's cool.
Yep.
I mean, the trailers have got me pretty excited. It looks like they've spent a lot of money on this series, or the money that they've spent on it is on the screen. And I think the gap between TVs and movies is getting smaller because I've seen some previews for other shows like I don't know if you're aware of that. There's a new X-Files miniseries coming out this near the end of January, and some of the trailers for that behind the scenes stuff, some of the stuff that they're doing like with special effects and that, it really makes it seem cinematic. It's pretty impressive. So I'm hoping that this series is going to do the same thing as well. Yeah,
TV is looking better and better now, and more as each episode is more like an individual movie. Yeah. So, and I guess they get more money to do each episode as well. So,
right.
But it's good. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
All right. So that's the 11/22/63 news. Also up, and this was a great find that I don't know if you found this, Hans, or did somebody bring this to your attention, this interview?
See, I think I actually got an email about it. And,
okay. All right. Well, you're looking that up. I'll talk about it.
Yeah.
In the main Seniors Magazine, which is a regional publication for that area. There's a extensive interview with Steve and Tabitha, and while it doesn't add anything from a fan's perspective in terms of Steve's writing, it does flesh out his social activities in the area which he has made famous in his books, and also Tabitha gets to discuss a couple of things as well, and we find out that they do a lot of charity work. It is interesting to see there's a picture of the doctor, his family doctor, who he uses in his as a reference for any medical things in his books, because I think he's done a dedication to him before in one of his books, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
So it's kind of nice to be able to put a face to the name. And there's just a lot of great pictures of their property and of their sitting around the house and whatnot. So it's a pretty cool article. Find out what Stephen King's favorite book is and what kind of stuff Tabitha likes to be reading and the stuff that they're currently reading. So it's pretty cool. A lot of great pictures.
Yeah, definitely. It was interesting to see that they had so many new taken photos of them. Because they are very private and really doesn't want to be more than enough, more than they have to in the papers and stuff like that. If you read this, they also doesn't want to talk about all the charity they do.
Yeah.
And someone even had to tell them that you have to talk about them, because if you do that, they will inspire others to do the same. Right. So I think it shows very much how humble they are and their willingness to give back. So that's really great. Mm-hmm. And I was very interested to hear that one of Tabitha's hobbies is gardening. And about 5 years ago, she bought the Petri Orchid in Sweden, Maine. Mm-hmm. That's quite kind of interesting.
Okay.
I hadn't heard about that.
Oh.
I don't really know what it is. I think it's some apple, where they grow apple, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. So it talks about that, how she sells them and stuff like that as well. So
cool.
What I think is a little bit sad is that they doesn't really mention her writing anymore. Mm-hmm. So it gets me wondering if she have given it up totally. And the next news item is the everlasting It movie, or 2 movies, or how many it will now be. And the first news is actually from Andy Muschietti, who is doing the script, I think. He is actually Cary Fukunaga's replacement, and he talked about it a little bit on his Facebook page, and he says like this, and I will read what he wrote. Hi all, it's very hard to talk about someone else's vision of a movie. The way Cary intended to execute the script is something that only he can talk about. I can say that my version of it highly emphasizes Pennywise's most terrifying virtue, which is its ability to materialize into your worst fear. I want to take people on a journey into Pennywise's world through a disturbing, surrealistic, and intoxicating experience that will leave nobody at ease. And that sounds very promising, I think, that it will be scary. And the other news is actually, I think, kind of sad. And that is that we earlier talked about that Will Poulter was cast as Pennywise. And at that time, we didn't really know if he was cast or if it was just a rumor, but now it seems like he's actually confirming that he was cast. But the sad news is that he isn't anymore, because his comment to that Cary Fukunaga isn't in the project anymore is that my loyalty had to be with Cary. His vision for it was brilliant, dark, really layered and original. I'm gutted that it is not happening. So it seems like he's out of the game, and I wish he would be still considered to be Pennywise, because I think he would make a good Pennywise. Mm-hmm. What do you think, Lou?
Well, they could always ask Idris Elba.
Yeah,
sorry, I couldn't resist. Yeah. I mean, I was always intrigued by when his casting was first announced for this. He has that interesting look. He almost looks sort of like Pennywise. You just have to really put the makeup on him, the white face. So, and I've seen him in is it Meet the Millers, I think? He definitely has that edge that you need for the character. So, but I think there's tons of other actors that can easily play this part just as well. But it would have been interesting to see his version of it. We'll just have to hope that Mr. Machete cuts up another good candidate for playing Pennywise the Clown.
Yeah. Okay, and that is it for the news for this episode.
This is great. What's our job? We'd like drive around, pick up stiffs or what?
It's time for reviews from the night shift.
That's right. And we're going to kick off our next segment, picking off the second half of the Bazaar of Bad Dreams. And we had this covered. So our next book story in the book is Herman Wouk is Still Alive. And this is one of my favorite book stories in the book, actually. And, it was a seed for the story was based on the idea of this writer, Herman Wouk, who wrote, Wings of War and some other famous books. And that guy's like in his 90s and he's still kicking it, so that's pretty awesome. So King took that idea and he matched it up with, created these two characters. So you have basically two sets of characters. There's one with an older couple, not married, but I think they just sort of hang out together. But they're into their 70s, I guess, or late 60s. So they've lived a full life, and one's a poet and the other's a writer. So I don't know if these is supposed to be like a kind of like an idealized version of him and Tabitha. But they've seen a lot of wonderful things, and you could say they've lived a really good life. And then they have the other set of characters, which is probably relatable to way more people. Is some. Two women in the earlier, with a bunch of kids. They live in trailers. There's not a lot of money. They're not as good looking as they used to be. They put on a lot of weight. Their husbands are kind of shiftless and not worthy. So one of them wins a lotto ticket or a small lottery prize, just enough to sort of like go on a trip. And so she rents this van, and she's got all these kids in there, and her and her friends sort of start, taking a couple of drinks while they're driving, which, is never a good idea. But so you've got these two contrasting worlds of these two writers versus these two women with all their kids, who realize that in that moment that this is probably the best it's going to be for them for a long time, if ever again. And whether they agree on it or silently, or whether the driver just sort of projects her feelings into her friend, she basically goes on a suicide kamikaze run, and they go out in a blaze of glory, I guess you could say. And this ties into the writers who witnessed this, and it's just this conflation of these two, or a collision, I guess, of these two different worlds, and how the writers react to it is part of it. But it's just like really two different worlds literally crashing together, and it just kind of stuns these writers. And I think I don't know. I really loved it because it's a difficult story to quantify, because it's all about feelings for me. And while I can understand these women that sort of making this decision, it's also very, the fact that they're taking all their kids with them as well, versus this other couple that are kind of just, aging gracefully and hoping to live out the rest of her life in peace and quiet. So it's a very complex story, but I really like it quite a bit.
Yeah, I agree. And I like the mix of this older couple, and they are having a great time, and these women who really doesn't like their lives, and it's described so very well, but still they are so different. And then you end the story with some gruesomeness as well. So I think it's a good mix, and I think it works very fine. It gives you again this little, where you just get a glimpse of a couple of characters' lives, and you don't really know that much about them, or you just pop in on them for a while, as I mentioned before in some of these stories, and I like that type of stories. Mm-hmm. So I think this one is a great one. Both that King describes this loving older couple, these miserable middle-aged moms, and then some gruesome stuff at the end where body parts are flying. So I think you get the best of all worlds in this one.
Yeah. I mean, it just makes you question your values in life, because like the lady writer is basically feeling now that her whole life has been on where she and this guy thought they had done great things with their lives. Now she just feels like it's all been just like they've been just children playing when they see something like this. So it really makes you sit back and reevaluate your list of priorities and whatnot. And it's just one of those, it's kind of like Batman and Robin have an altercation. It's just one of those stories that really makes you sit back and think about things.
Yeah. Okay, should we move on to the next one?
Mm-hmm.
This one is called Under the Weather. And this one is actually one of my favorites in the collection. And it's a story about a man who lives in this building. And when he wakes up in the morning, he sneaks up, lets his wife sleep, and he sneaks up and makes breakfast. And he doesn't want to wake the wife, so he takes it. He doesn't want to disturb her. So he makes his breakfast, and he writes her a note saying that he's gone to work, and sneaks out to work. And as he leaves, he talks to the doorman in the building, and he's mentioning that they are having problem with smells in the floor. And the character in the book story hasn't noticed, because he doesn't have any. He's lost his ability to smell, and his wife has been sick and hasn't smelled anything. But they think they have located it. It's probably a dead rat in the flat under them, or something like that. So he goes off to work, and everything is good. And all through the story, it's told as if his wife is sick, and everybody's asking, and the more he thinks about his past, and we get this sense that maybe she isn't just sick. And as the punchlines come later on, that she's actually dead, and she's the one smelling up the house. By that time, I think we had figured it out. I don't know about you, but I think I had it pretty much figured out by then. And but I like the you don't know where it's going, and then more and more it dawned on you that is actually the case. So it basically ends with he not wanting her to leave him, and it is referred to another episode earlier on that happened long ago, that she wouldn't leave him and stuff like that. So you get the sense that this is what's happening. But and then you have the gruesome stuff thrown in there with dog nagging on the fingers, so the bone is showing, and so it's a good mix, I think. Yeah,
it's it's a really relatable story for a lot of people, especially older couples. If one, the prospect of trying to go on after your spouse passes away is, for some people, it's very difficult or almost impossible to comprehend or live through. And this guy is very much in the stage of denial. And you have a feeling that denial by the end of the story is pretty well over, whether he's ready for it or not. So, because other people are complaining about the smell in the building and whatnot, and even he's starting to notice the smell. So, but it's kind of like the story, the Western about the guy with that killed the girl. King makes you sort of flip-flop back and forth for about maybe 3/4 of the story before you begin to can definitely say, yeah, okay, she's passed on, and he's just denying it. But up until that point, it's a nice balancing act of, well, maybe she is, maybe she isn't. And then, like you said, then at that one point in the story, you go, boom, okay, then she definitely is, and this guy's got a serious problem. So it's a nasty little tale. Well done.
It is, yes.
Yeah. All right. Up next, and this is an older story, and I think it's the biggest story in the book. And Blockade Billy. What can we say about Blockade Billy? I think even King must have been reading the reviews on this one, because he references the fact that people should really give this story a try, just because it's baseball. It's just the baseball is just as an allegory for something else. But it's just one of those things that, like, I'm pretty sure you said it numerous times that you're not a baseball fan. I'm not either. I used to be when I was younger, but I understand, like, for the United States, baseball is woven into their fabric of their culture, much like hockey is for Canada. What is Sweden's? What sport do you guys identify?
I think it's ice hockey, football, and skiing.
Football, you mean by soccer, right?
Yeah, soccer. Yeah.
So
that would probably be our.
So I have to be honest. When I was reading this book, because I had already read this story, I skipped this one and read it at the end, just to be a completionist. Because while I understand what he's doing here, he's taking something that is considered, baseball is. It's kind of like it's the conventions of it and its rules and that. These not just the written ones, but the unspoken ones about how players behave on and off the field is an allegory for the disillusionment or the general breakdown of respect for conventions in this American society, not just in American society, but in the world in general. So while I appreciate the story from that perspective, and I think King writes it as well as it can be, but yeah. It's framed within a world that I'm just not interested in. So I've never read his book that he did with that other guy, Stuart Onan, about the Boston Red Sox.
Yeah,
Faithful, and I never will. And as well as the story is written, I think it's almost something that should have been written. I don't know how old the story is, but I think it's something that should have been written before all this controversy with baseball was revealed about the drug scandals and steroids and all this kind of stuff. So I can understand King loves baseball, so he wanted to write this baseball story. But I almost, for myself, because I don't care for the sport, to me this feels like a story that was written too late in time. But your mileage is going to vary whether or not you like baseball. And the funny thing is, the book he did about the girl who loved Tom Jordan. I mean, the baseball's kind of peripheral to that story, but I really like that story. I think that's a great story. But this one is too much baseball for me. So
I read this one when it came out the first time as a standalone book actually, and I remember also having very difficulties with the baseball talk, and I think I zoomed out a little bit when he described the rules and when stuff was happening, that I suppose if you knew what was or understood it, you would thought maybe it was exciting. But for me, it didn't really do anything. So I just, it was more like just empty words. It didn't mean so much to me. Yeah. So I think you would definitely enjoy this story more if you understood baseball. But I still think you can understand it without it. If you just if you don't get hung up on the baseball terms that you don't understand, that if you just read on and doesn't pay much attention to them, you can still like the story. And the funny thing was that this October I was actually in the US in New York, when the New York's Yankees, is that the name?
Yep.
Yankees, yeah. They were in, I can't say if they were in the finals or if they were on their way to the finals. I'm not sure, but it was a big thing in New York at least.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I actually one night at the hotel, I actually gave it some time and watched the baseball.
Mm-hmm.
And I understood about as much afterwards that I did before, so it didn't give me anything actually. And I still don't know if the game was split in 2 days or if it was actually 2 games I watched. So that gives you an idea of how much I understood. But
no, they don't split a game over days. It's always one game is finished within a day.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
then I guess I watched part of 2 games.
Yeah.
And then I read the Blockade Bill again after when I came home.
Mm-hmm.
But it was still the same. I had some more mental image of what it would look like when someone was on this and that base and hitter and thrower or whatever they're called. But it didn't do anything for me really. So I think if you don't understand baseball, you can still read this story and enjoy the story itself, because I think it's a pretty good story with a twist at the end.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you can enjoy that, but you have to just read on when the baseball stuff comes along and not get hung up on that you don't understand them. So if you do that, I think you can enjoy this one.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think like if you do like baseball, then you're probably going to enjoy the story a lot more. For my money, definitely. The best baseball movie I've seen, or baseball related story I've seen, is actually a movie with Kevin Costner's Field of Dreams, which is pretty cool, and I like that use of baseball in that story is, I think, about the best you're ever going to get. So. Yeah, it's it's in there. King is a fan, and if he wants to, if that's something he wanted to write about, what can you say? I'm just glad he doesn't do it very often.
Yeah, and I think actually that there are some true stuff in here about the Yankees and who played for them at that time and stuff like that. That if you are a baseball fan, you will recognize these names as actual players. I think so. I think you and I are losing some of it, but that someone.
Yeah, no, I know the names.
Will get,
I'm familiar with baseball. I used to follow it when I was younger, but when they went on the strike back in the 90s or whatever it was, that's when I stopped watching it. So.
Okay.
And that's kind of when I got out of all sports in general. But yeah. Anyhow. Next story.
Yes, this one
Boy,
is actually...
I've really drawn the good hand here. Actually, I'm sorry, it's your turn, isn't it?
This is my turn, yes.
Yes. Oh, I was going to... See, I wanted to grab the story from you like you did for me last time, but...
Yeah, you can grab it.
I will let you go. It's okay.
Yeah, this one is actually one that's written for this book called Mr. Yummy. One of the 2 stories that is new for this book.
Say that again?
One of the 2 stories.
No, the title, sorry.
Mr. Yummy?
I like the way you said that. Mr. Yummy.
Mr. Yummy.
Yummy. Sorry.
Yep. It's okay. So this one is once again about older people who lives in a retirement home, Dave and Ollie, and we get to meet them, and this is actually a pretty short story. I think it's just under 20 pages, 18 pages, so it's a short story, and the short description of it is actually that Dave is about to die, and he knows this because he sees this person who is not live, but he sees him, and he sees him getting closer and closer, and that is how he knows that he is going to die. And he calls this person Mr. Yummy. And his friend Ollie doesn't really believe him that he is actually seeing someone, and that is the meaning that he's going to die just because he sees them. But Dave dies, and shortly after that, Ollie himself is actually seeing someone himself, a woman who no one else sees, and he understands that this is his, I guess, Mrs. Yummy, since it's a she.
Yep.
And he takes his son out to dinner and basically says his goodbyes to him because he knows that his time is up as well.
Yep.
So this is a pretty short story. Once again, you just drop in on these guys who has probably had a lot of experience and a lot of fun, and on the way leading up to this retirement home, and we get to see them during the last part of their life. So it's a good story. It's not my favorite story, but it's definitely a good story. What did you think about it?
I love the story.
Yeah.
It's one of my top ones in the book, and because it was a new one, I had never read it before. I was really pleasantly surprised by it. And the preface to the story, where King talks about wanting to write a story about the power of this human sex drive, and how long it lasts, and how at certain, depending on where you are in your life, it could become like an overriding drive over everything else, and the risks you will take to satisfy that. And I think the story, like when he pitched the idea to a friend of his, it was one of the few stories that he had or kind of had in his head before he started writing it. And talking to somebody about it, they said, "No, you can't write about that, Steve, because you don't know about AIDS or anything like that." To me, that I understand he's using that as the to show how powerful the human's need for companionship is, but really you could really take that whole element out of the story and it would still work. But I just think it's a really, really well done story, and I like the idea that everybody starts to see something, even when you're near death or when your life is over, that you still come back to that sort of like that first kiss or that obsession, and that sort of like is the bookmark for telling you to let you know that you're near the end of your journey. I guess it could be kind of awkward if your wife or husband was still alive and you were seeing somebody else, but
yeah.
Yeah, but I really like that concept. I just think that I thought this, and the title is like Mr. Yummy, and I thought, this is going to be some sort of cannibal story or something like that. But yeah, I really like this story. It's one of my favorites in this of the book, and that by this point in the collection, you're getting if there's one theme that's overriding theme that's tying these stories together, is King's writing stories that deal with death quite a bit in this collection.
Yeah. Okay.
All right, and lucky me, I get the next poem.
Yes.
This one's a lot easier to understand than the other one. This one's called Tommy. The previous one was the Bone Church, and on that podcast we had both said that we had difficulty understanding the story because poetry is a different delivery mechanism and narrative style for telling a story. It's a lot closer to the bone and much more open to interpretation. And I think somebody had sent in a comment after that podcast and saying that we should try reading the poems out loud to see if that helps us understand them better. And what was your experience trying that, Hans?
Well, I tried, and it absolutely changed nothing for me. I guess I'm not the poem guy.
No, for Tommy, Tommy's a pretty straightforward story, and King's touched on these types of themes before about how, and he's discussed it in author's notes I think it was especially in the Hearts of Atlantis, about during the 60s, his generation thought they were going to change the world, and they ended up selling out for Walmart and donuts and whatnot. So
yeah.
So this story is really about dealing with that. But I did find reading out the Bone Church aloud did help me visualize things better. But just the act of reading that one out loud it was awkward. The sentences didn't always flow like in a regular narrative. So Whether that's an indication of my poor reading skills or that King didn't quite get a flow with that poem, I'll leave that up for you to decide as you and the listeners out there. But Tommy flowed a lot better, but it's also a much more relatable and understandable story, whereas the Bone Church is, it's kind of out there. It's almost got a little bit of H.P. Lovecraft feel to it in a way. But this one is just, about the disillusionment of the 60s generation, and the narrator of this poem is just thinking back on all the people that didn't get out of the 60s and who ended up being better off. Those people who didn't make it out of the 60s, or the ones that survived and like him in old age now, or just have regrets about how they failed to change the world.
Yeah, well, as I said, I'm not a poem guy, and this, I'm sorry to say, but it didn't do anything for me. So I actually read it and tried to read it again, and then I moved on. So, well, it's not my favorite to say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, King says it. He's not the best poet. I thought this one was actually pretty good. Yeah, it's something that he's done better in other stories, I think.
Yeah, and I still want to say that I think it's good that he's trying to do different things.
Absolutely.
Like poem. I think we talked about this earlier. So
yeah, and King,
I think he should
that
definitely
up too, like with Mr. Yummy.
Yeah.
And just writing the Bill Hodges trilogy, he says, "Why can't I write a mystery series? I can. I'm a writer. I can write whatever I want." So
yeah,
that's
yeah, and I mean,
cool.
Yeah, and he's reached the point where he can basically get anything published, I would guess. So why not give it a try? And, I'm sure some people will like it, some will not.
Yeah.
But I mean, if some like it, then I guess it's still good that it's out there.
Yeah, for sure. And my final point would this be, I just thought he explored this type of material in much greater detail and depth and more success in The Hearts in Atlantis. So if you want to find out what King's thoughts on are about the 60s and that, just read that book. Yeah.
Okay, moving on to the next story. This one is called The Little Green God of Agony. And in this book we meet Mr. Newsom, who has survived a plane crash and is now in recovery, but he still has very big pains that he tries to get rid of. And he's taken care of by Catherine. And, well, she's paid very well for this job, so she doesn't want to complain. But she thinks the complaints, so we as the reader can know them. And she feels that he isn't really doing everything he can to get better. And instead of actually doing physical training and stuff like that, he brings in these, alternate doctors, if you want to call them that, who he wants to, he's willing to pay them a lot of money if they can fix his pain. And one after the other is failing in releasing his pain. The pain is still there, and Catherine is still there, doing his, taking care of his legs and backs and stuff like that. And it's apparent to the reader that this has happened before, because when we come into the story, the last in the row of the alternative doctors, Reverend Ridout, is there, and Newsom is telling him what's happened with the plane crash and everything, and Catherine knew exactly what he's going to say before he say them, so we know that this has happened before. And she also know that probably the healer won't heal him this time either, as so many times before. But it turns out that something is very different this time, and it might actually work. And it ends up with Reverend Ridout actually releasing some kind of creature from Newsom, who is causing the pain. So this time it's actually working for real. And I think this was quite interesting story. I like the character build in the beginning of the story where we hear newsmen talking about this. Newsome, sorry, very hard name to get right. Talking about this again and again, and Catherine, who has heard it, she comments on them to herself, and so on. And it also ends with something being extracted from Newsom. We don't know what it is. But the last line in the story is, in the darkness, something had crawled onto the back of her hand, indicating that the thing causing the pain might still be there. So, I think this one is a good story. Once again, it's not my favorite in the book, but it's definitely a good story.
Yeah, I remember when we discussed this came out in comic book form. A while back, and we talked about how we had confusion at the end of this comic strip because the climax of the story wasn't properly illustrated. It left out too much. So this definitely clears that up, and I like the story a lot better in this form. The thing here is that Newsom is a character who is, I guess, because of his position in life, he expects things to come too easily to him. But on the other hand, his nurse, Catherine, has lost her compassion for her patients over the years. And somebody like Newsom is, he just, to her, exemplifies all the bad things in patients. And the preacher man, Ridout, however you want to say it, he sees that in her. And he not only seems to cure Newsom, but he also helps Catherine regain her compassion. But the price for her is that it seems like the little green god of agony is going to become part of her. So it's a chilling little tale. It's a nifty little piece, a straight up horror story. I like it quite a bit.
Yeah. Okay. Should we move on to the next one?
Yes, we should. And That Bus is Another World. And this is a story that was inspired, I believe, during his last European tour.
Yes.
And this is a pretty cool story. And it's really simple. There's a bit of a framing device about this character Wilson, who's on the way to a business meeting, his final big break. He's been a struggling artist, and now he's got an opportunity to he's actually into advertising. So he's got this advertising campaign that he thinks will help turn public opinion back in favor of this oil company who's had a big oil spill. And in some ways it reminds me, there's echoes of Cujo in here, with that character who was trying to help a cereal company recover from the disaster of, I guess, food coloring in their cereal that was making it look like kids were bleeding.
Yep.
So he's he's on his way to this meeting. He's flown into New York City, and he's in a cab. And as it is, and this is again something that we've all experienced. I'm pretty sure you have too, Hans. And I don't know how bad traffic jams are in Sweden, but he gets to a point where he stops at a stoplight, and for that brief interval, he's beside a bus. And in that bus, he sees somebody else. And I think we've all had this, or at least I've had this, where I see somebody say, I wonder what this person's life is all about, and I'm never going to see them again. And so for a brief second, you're like two passing ships in the night. And that's the extent of it. But again, King takes us to the next level, and he sees the woman that he's seeing in the window beside her husband or boyfriend or whatever, kills her. And after he's done killing her, he looks up at the Wilson and smiles, and then just as he does that, then the taxi pulls away. And of course, Wilson is totally shocked, and he's just, did I just see that, or did I imagine that? And then he starts, to rationalize it, and then he just, he says, even if I got involved, there's no way to find out who it was or whatever it was. So he just lets it go and continues on with his life. So And another one, it's kind of has echoes of that Herman Wouk story. I like this one quite a bit as well.
Yes, I agree. I like this also. The only thing that I wish, or after I read it, I felt that it was very short, and there were so many things in there that you wanted to know more about. That I
think that's the whole purpose of the story.
Yeah, I guess it is. and that annoys me a little bit about this one, because I think there was extra much about this one I wanted to know. And I guess that means King has done his job, because you should
absolutely
be a bit annoyed about this.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good thing, while it's a bad thing, something like that, you know. But this one is actually, I think I like this one extra much because I was actually in Hamburg 2013 when King on stage told us about this idea he had, which then turned out to be this story. So this story is a little bit special for me, actually, because I was there when he told about the idea.
Yeah, that's gonna be cool.
Yeah, and from the idea to actually read it and then see it in the book, that's quite fun to see the process of everything.
Mm-hmm.
But I agree, it's a good story, even though it bugs me a little bit. Okay, moving on. The next story is called Obits, and this is the second new one in the book, if you don't count Bad Little Kid, who was actually published but only in a different language. But otherwise, this one is the second totally new story. And this is actually a story about Michael Anderson, who works as a newsman, who finds out that when he writes, he writes in, is it called tabloid?
Yeah.
Yeah. Who and they write, or he writes obituaries for not dead people, but if they were dead, and you could be as mean as possible to them in their obituary. That is what he writes for fun, I assume. And what he finds out is that if he writes an obituary for a person, that person actually dies. So he can actually kill with his obituaries. And he tells his his coworker?
Yep.
About this, and she wants him to kill someone, so he does that, and it really tells the story of how he feels about doing it, because it feels good to him when he do it, but of course he knows that it's wrong and he's actually killing someone. And this story is narrated, so you have like an ending where the person, Michael Anderson, tells you that this is my story, basically, and it ends with him telling you, okay, that's my story. So this story is told to you by him.
Yeah.
And I think it's an interesting story, and it's an interesting thought that you could actually kill someone by just writing about them. And I think it's not a ability that I would like to have.
Yeah, especially if you wrote your own obituary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure it could come in handy sometimes, but.
Well, yeah, that'd be awfully tempting, wouldn't it?
Yeah. What did you think about this one?
Yeah, it was. I enjoyed it because I had, it was like you said, it was a new story. It's a straight up, pretty well like a straight up horror story, something like you would see on The Twilight Zone or something like that. And I think he actually wrote a story. He wrote a story, The Typewriter of Gods, which was even more powerful than this story. So this is kind of like a subset of that story, because in Typewriter of the Gods, not only could he kill things or destroy things, he could also create things. So this is kind of going into that same territory. So it's a smaller story, but it deals much more with the, like you said, the push-pull, attraction, revulsion aspects of having such a weird ability or terrible ability that you could, write a obituary as a joke piece and then have it actually come true after it's been printed. So I think that was my favorite aspect of it. It's because I think we've all experienced something that when we're doing it, we says that this is not good, but at the same time while you're doing it, you say, yeah, but I feel terrible, but I am enjoying it as well. So it's kind of, it's kind of like an addiction. It's an addiction story, like, alcohol or drugs. At the time when you're doing it, you might be enjoying the experience, but afterwards, when you have to sort of like get your feet back on the ground and recover, you either have withdrawal symptoms or a hangover or something like that. So this is kind of that same story idea, and I can't say it's one of my favorite stories in the book, but it's a creepy little piece, but it's something that you would see like on Tales from the Crypt or something like that.
Yep, definitely.
Yep.
Okay.
All right. Next one, and this is an interesting one, and King has to include his antidote about the old lady in the supermarket and saying that she knows who he is and he should write something else besides those horror stories and something nice like a Shawshank Redemption, which just sounds too true to be true, but I guess it has to be, but because I just love the fact that I wrote that. I mean, it's so weird that it has to be true that this really happened. But it does almost sound too good to be true. But anyhow, there was this, he overheard some guy talking about a fireworks arms race on a lake in Maine, and that led to this next story. And this is really just a comedy story. There's not really any horrific elements in it. And I know it was released as an audiobook first, and no disrespect to the narrator of the story, because I think King's a fan of his, and apparently this guy's a well-known, at least in Maine, as a comedian. But I thought his reading of this story was just unlistenable. There's a point. It's one thing to get into character, and he got to play a lot of different main characters here, but I ended up just listening to how he was saying things as opposed to what he was saying, which just took me out of the story, and I couldn't even finish it. So it was nice to be able to finally read the story and finish it. But and maybe my first experience with the audiobook has kind of tainted my experience, and maybe this is works better in a local Maine setting, but I thought it was okay. But it's just seemed rather too absurd to even. I didn't really find it that funny because I knew where it was going to end up. So, and I just thought the ending was a little too neat, that everybody sort of walks away just with no repercussions. So, it's basically an arms race between a local Maine, some local Maine residents who were fortunate to win. Their father had some life insurance money, and they basically are drinking themselves to death. His mother and boy. And then there's, I guess they would call them newbies across the lake. You sort of get the impression that they're mafia related or some sort of crime family or something like that. And they end up getting into this arms race with fireworks. And so each year they load up for bear with bigger and bigger fireworks. And then it finally gets to the point where it gets out of control and the out-of-towners' house is burnt down, and everybody ends up in jail. So, and then later on, the Maine residents, their house is burnt down as well under suspicious circumstances, which leads to both parties just sort of agreeing to say let bygones be bygones and go on their way. So, yeah, it's okay story, but it's not one that I'll come back to very often. Because there's nothing really in it other than it's sort of like a long, protracted joke that sort of loses it. To me, it wasn't really funny after like the first or after the second or third repetition of the fireworks show.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And like you, I also listened to the audiobook first, and I was not happy about this one because partly because the accent is, as you say, it's so deep that you listen more to how he says things than what he says.
Yeah.
And
which to me is a failure, because you can tell you can take on these affectations, but you're doing that in order to make the story come to life. And if you overpower the story with your performance, then that to me is not a satisfactory performance.
No, I agree totally. And also I think that this is probably because of the accent, that the character, the son, he felt like he was like about 50 years old to me. And
well, I think
that
he is.
didn't really... Sorry?
I think he is that old.
Yeah, and if he is, don't think that fits the story, because still living home with mom at that age.
Well, I think that was part of the joke, right?
Yeah, I was hoping that maybe it was because of the accent that I saw him as older than he actually was in the story.
Yeah, I think he's in his late 40s, early 50s, and his mother's in her 70s or something like that.
Okay, then it's just sad.
Yeah, well, that's part of the joke, right?
Yeah, well, it's not a favorite story, so I think we can say that for sure for both of us.
Okay.
Okay, moving on to the last story in the book, and actually one that I liked, and I think if I remember correctly, you wasn't too fond of it when we reviewed it earlier. And this is actually a story of the world coming to an end. There's been some wars going on or something like that. Mankind has died out, and the only people living are these two old men and a dog. Basically everybody else is dead, and every animal is dead, and we get to know these people when they know that everything is over, but they are still hanging in there. And I think there's been some kind of nuclear blast or something, a warhead, and they know that their time is limited, and it's going to end soon. But they hang in there, and it's a sad story, but it's still, I think it's, once again, it shows that the king's ability to tell a story and to paint these characters very, very real to us. That makes it's a powerful story, I think. But I think you, if I remember correctly, you thought it was maybe too powerful.
Well, it's depressing.
Yeah,
that's what it is. I agree with you.
The world is ending, so
I agree with everything you say. It's really well written. It's tremendously sad and depressing. So, as a cautionary tale, with going out with a whimper, not a bang. I understand it from that perspective, but yeah, I mean, it's like that TV movie they had back in was it the 80s, or I think it was the 80s, The Day After, which was supposed to show what life would be like after a nuclear holocaust or World War III, and people just slowly started dying out, and it's just like, yeah, it's not a good thing. So like, what are you supposed to say? Because it's I can't. I think it's a really good story, but it's just it's just not something that, it's kind of like watching like The Day After, or if you ever see Schindler's List or some really sad story like that. Like, it's something that when you're watching it, you have appreciated that you watched it, but it's not something that I'm going to pull off the shelf and say, oh, gee, I think I should go read Summer Thunder again, because I think that's a really great story, and I'm in the mood to read a nice piece of really good writing, because it's just so depressing. Like, I need a little hope, like I need some Shawshank Redemption hope in my stories. I'm just glad it's a short story and not a novel.
Yeah, that would be tough.
Yeah.
But I think it's a good story still.
Oh, I agree. It's a good story.
Yep. And we have totally forgotten to tell everybody where the stories were originally published, as we did with the first 10 stories. So I'm just going to run that really quick here.
Okay.
Herman Wouk is Still Alive was published in The Atlantic in 2011. Under the Weather was in the mass market paperback of Full Dark No Stars. That's quite interesting. It's not very often a new story is published in the paperback. It's usually an extract from the next coming book, so that's interesting. Blockade Billy was published as a standalone book, first from Cemetery Dance and then from Scribner. Mr. Yummy was new for this one. Tommy was in Playboy, apparently. The Little Green God of Agony was in A Book of Horrors from 2011. That Bus is Another World was in Esquire 2014. Orbit was new to this one. Drunken Fireworks was released as a CD, audiobook. And Summer Thunder was released by Cemetery Dance in 2013 in a collection they released. So there you have it, all the 20 stories in Bazaar of Bad Dreams. Should we pick a favorite?
Sure. Just one? Or
can you pick one?
Just one would be hard. I can pick like two or three.
Yeah, you can do that.
I would say Batman and Robin Have an Altercation, Herman Wouk is Still Alive, and Mr. Yummy were probably my top three stories.
My favorite was Batman Robin, as you said, A Death, and Under the Weather.
Cool.
So, and Summer Thunder also has to be in there.
And I would have to say also that I don't think Summer Thunder should have been the story to end the collection. If it would have been my choice, it would have been Mr. Yummy. But I guess that's, because I like that story has kind of got an upbeat ending to it, whereas Summer Thunder just leaves you kind of depressed. So,
yeah.
I kind of like to walk away from a book with a feeling of enjoyment, and finishing with Summer Thunder doesn't give that to me. So I was actually kind of surprised that was the final book in the collection. But it is the Bazaar of Bad Dreams, so I guess he wanted us to end with a nightmare.
Yeah, and I think that it's a very even collection.
Yes.
All the stories, or with the exception of the poems, for me at least, I think it's good stories. They are from good to really good. There isn't really one of them that's weak. I think they are all good stories, and so it's high quality in the collection, I think.
Yeah, I agree. It's a very consistent, high level stuff with probably Drunken Fireworks is the only story that I would, if it was not in the collection, wouldn't bother me. And to a lesser degree, Blockade Billy. But the rest of the stories are definitely worthy of rereading.
Yep. Okay, so that concludes the books of 2015.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And now we're going to conclude the TV shows of 2015.
Yes, with Haven.
Yeah, you want to set that up for us? What happened? We got up to episode what? 20?
Episode 20, yes. And where we were left off was with Nathan and Vince goes back in time, and they realize that Dave is the one who killed the Colorado Kid, and he was possessed by Croatone when he did it. And Croatone is still possessing Dave and makes him do different things. He's trying to get troubles to him, and by killing other people. So when we come back to the story in episode 21, Duke is actually returning back to Haven, and it's funny. You see how they throw in everyone, a lot of people who's been in the show before, and this time Nathan actually goes through one of those thinnies that we've been seeing and hearing so much about, and in it he meets William, who we remember from was it last season?
Yep.
Or season 4 maybe.
Season 4. Yep.
Yeah. And he was the one who helped Mara Haven and making troubles. What Nathan is doing in the thinny is actually that he needs to go back and get some kind of controller for the old barn who exploded, and bring it back so that what is his name? The guy from the beginning. Anyhow, he was the caretaker of the barn, and with the controller he might be able to create a new barn for them to trap Croatoan in. And so there we have two old faces back again, William and the other person who I can't remember his name.
Agent Howard?
Yeah, exactly, Agent Howard. And he is like some kind of hologram now that pops up from time to time.
Yeah.
And what did you think about him going through the thinny and meeting William again?
Well, it was gratifying to finally see the Duke arc come back into the Haven playground. So, his whole reason really for going outside of Haven ended up to bringing back this girl that can open and close thinnies. And I thought that played out fairly well, especially when she ended up being stuck in the gate after sending Nathan into the void. So the void was interesting. It was good to see William again. I enjoyed that episode. And we're just talking about this one particular episode, right? We're not jumping into the other ones?
You can jump as you
okay.
We can save with the ending. Can we save to the last? But besides that, you can talk about whatever you want. Yeah.
Right. So that played out well. That control rod. I mean, I still think Haven overall did a pretty good job with their mythology, but at times they seemed to just pull things out of the air. And this control rod was like one of those, or controller was one of those things that looked like one of the crystals from the Superman movie.
Yeah.
So, you've got this ball with all the ether, and then now you've got this controller. But at the same time, you're feeling the show is moving towards an end. So you're starting to bring back in elements from previous seasons. And I think in this last quarter or back half of the season, they did a really good job of tying up a lot of loose ends and closing things off. So from that perspective, I was happy with. So you just kind of rolled with these things that they were seemingly pulling out of the air. And one of the problems though was, or one of the obstacles the show had set up for itself was, each episode we were hearing more and more about this Croatoan creature or person or whatever it was. And then we have, Dave is fighting this thing in his mind, so that you're in your mind, you're this Croatoan thing. You think, wow, this is going to be like some really badass, dude, right? And so, we're waiting because eventually he's got to show himself. Especially after the episode where Dave foolishly, in retrospect, sacrifices himself in trying to prevent Croatoan from leaving the void and coming back into Haven. And I did like the visuals of him breaking all those clocks and that to try to stop Croatoan from freezing time. So I thought that was pretty well done. But it is telling, and you and I were we've mentioned this in previous Haven podcasts, that we're kind of annoyed with these two brothers. That beyond Vince being upset, nobody really seemed to give a shit. Did you get that impression too, or?
Yeah, I got that impression as well. And it wasn't very. They didn't react very much to when he died either.
No.
They didn't miss him. Maybe they thought it was good to be rid of him. I don't know.
Well, they had a lot on their plate, but I just think the show really underplayed that quite a bit.
Yeah, I think so too. And I also think that in the first episode where we meet William again, I think they took some shortcuts in that episode. I mean, when they found the missing pieces of the barn, first thing, it looked very cheap. The stuff they found, it looked like do we have some rubbish we can throw in a pile here and say it's the barn?
Yeah.
And then for this, I don't know who that actually was, Audrey-looking white woman coming out there and demanding some answers, or she would destroy it. I thought that also went very, very easy for them. And also at the end, when William changed his mind and actually let Nathan return, that change was also, he was so very against Nathan and he wanted to kill him and he hated him and everything, and then just, oh, what the fuck. Sorry. Oh. What the heck. Yeah. And he just let him go back, and I thought that went very easy as well. So
yeah.
They did take some shortcuts, I think, in some of the episodes. And I maybe that was because they wanted to do so much before they came to the end, that they had to do it fast to manage to cram it all in these last episodes.
Yeah. Like, I appreciated the fact that they were bringing callbacks to previous elements, but I really think that bringing William back wasn't necessary. Didn't really add anything to the story. Again, it was just a stalling device, and I think they could have found something more personal for Nathan to experience than this conflict with William. I mean, it was nice. Yeah, sure, it's nice to bring an actor back that you've had on in previous seasons, but like you said, his story purpose was pretty negligible, and he gave up too easily. That's a characteristic of the show, I find in general, is that they set up these big obstacles, and then they're just sort of like, okay, whatever, you can go. It's like they get bored with the story, they don't bother to resolve it properly. So that kind of played in a little bit here, but I did appreciate seeing Agent Howard come back. How did you feel about that?
Yeah, I think he actually worked. Both that he worked good in the storyline, and actually he was a little bit funny when he popped in and out. Yeah. And he didn't take orders, and his program didn't allow him to do this and that, and so I think he was a good addition to bring back. Mm-hmm. And if we move on to the next episode, it was with all the surveillance cameras, and the dispatcher of the police station turned actually into the house. Yeah, and I
kind of missed when that happened. Did we ever see that happen? It just kind of like all of a sudden,
no.
Oh, what's her face? She's part of the building. And I'm going, what? When did that happen?
Yeah, I think they wanted to build that up so that we would suspect that it was Croatone at first. And then when it wasn't, they had to have someone else, and then they just...
And I don't remember this character at all, so it was kind of like...
No, I don't. I don't think she has any big... I mean, we saw a photo of her in the dispatch room or something like that. So
so that was good.
But I don't think she. She hasn't played a big part in the story. Yeah. So, but what I did like about those episodes, I didn't like the fact that she turned into a house, but I liked the fact that Duke was possessed by Croatone and was quite evil, killing off people and taking their abilities and or their troubles, and so I like that part of these episodes.
And at a certain point, like they had used effect before, but I found the more they use it, actually the creepier it got is every time his eyes turned black. That started to look really creepy. So it was kind of, I guess they were showing the power of Croatone, but again, it was kind of like how quickly Duke was taken power over, overpowered by Croatone. I wish they could have had a scene, even with just Duke by himself, showing him kind of struggling not to be, possessed. But they obviously want, like you said, they wanted the misdirection of us believing that it was Croatone doing these things, and he was indirectly through Duke. But I think Duke's character suffered a little bit because of that.
Yeah. And then in episode 24, in come William Shatner. As Croatone.
Yeah, and I gotta say, before he showed up, because I was in my mind, because we kind of like, we're down to the last couple episodes, we know William Shatner's coming up, so there's really only one character he can be. And it turned out to be Croatone, and it was kind of like, you've really built up this character or this Croton to be this really evil and all-imposing thing. So you're almost expecting like a big hulking, Jaws from the James Bond movies kind of character or something like that. So when William Shatner walks in with an overcoat and the hat, you're kind of going, "Oh boy, they better handle this carefully, or this could get awfully cheesy." Kind of like when he played the big head or the big cheese on Third Rock from the Sun? So I was really expecting it to turn into comedy. That was kind of like, I hope they know what they're doing here, but and I didn't understand it from a story perspective. Like, okay, they wanted to get William Shatner to play the part, but why was Mara's mother such a different, why was there such a big age gap between those two characters? Like, I didn't really understand that. That didn't make any sense to me, but.
Yeah, but didn't they didn't age, right? So I
That's
guess
right. So why would he let himself get so old?
Yeah, but he didn't figure out how to not age until he was old, and then he got himself a younger wife.
Okay. Yeah, that's possible. Okay, I never thought of it that way. But why didn't he just make himself look younger then? I mean.
Yeah, well, there's a limit to even his.
I guess so.
Well, yeah. But I liked it that they brought William Shatner in there, and I liked the contrast to just what you say, that you expected this big bad person, and in comes William Shatner, the father who just wants his daughter back, basically, and I think it worked. I think he did a great job.
Yeah, I think Shatner nailed it. Like, at this stage in his career, when you see William Shatner, you're kind of expecting to see William Shatner playing himself, but I really felt that he inhabited this character, and I didn't really see Shatner anymore. I just saw Croton, or this, like the father character, like you're talking about. So I thought he did a really good job. I was quite impressed with how quickly he alleviated my concerns that the show was heading for some sort of goofy comedy conclusion. So.
And I liked the way that he was this concerning father who just wanted his daughter back, and then he was a little bit evil as well, because when she didn't understand how he could use all these troubles, he broke her arm.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not very kind. And then he healed her up. So, but he had this evil in him. Yeah, even though he looked like this old kind grandfather when you looked at him. Mm-hmm. So I think he was perfect for the role. And then as we move on, we find out that Duke is actually collecting troubles for Croton. And much like we speculated in the last podcast, Duke sacrifices himself so that Croton won't get all the powers that now Duke has. And it ends up with Nathan strangling him, and Audrey is there comforting him as he's being strangled. Yep. And I actually thought that was a rather powerful scene.
Yes, I agree. I thought the speech that Audrey gave was very well done, and very well done and very well written. So you believed that she could talk him down, and allow himself to be killed. So, and I thought that was really well done as well. That played out pretty well. I was quite impressed with that. Even though to me it seemed like his sacrifice in the end turned out to be a futile one, because Croton was already powerful enough that these extra powers weren't really going to make much of a difference. So I don't know. It just seemed like he gave his life up for nothing, really. I didn't really buy the thing that he had to prevent Croton from getting all these other powers, because it didn't matter how many powers he was going to get. He still needed, in the end, Audrey to, complete his plans. So whether or not he had all the powers or not, or only some of them, to me, that point, maybe I just misunderstood it, but it never seemed like him having all the troubles was going to change anything.
No, I don't think so. I don't know. He would have been stronger, I guess, if he had the more powers he had. But
he kept saying he couldn't do it without Audrey, right? So
yeah, so it's well, I don't know exactly how they figured that
out.
So
again, this is where the Haven mythology gets a little fuzzy, because then this whole thing with the control the ether's been damaged. Because Duke used that acid trouble to eat at the heart of the ether. Which I don't really understand why acid would affect ether, but you just have to kind of roll with that. And I also like the fact that the girl that does the drawings, when he ripped that drawing in half, that the drawing, the core shattered, and that whole scene was pretty tense when he was trying to get to the girl, because I kept on expecting the older doctor, to get killed first. So that was well played as well, though. So that episode had a lot of tension in it. It was pretty good. And then we find out that Vince makes the sacrifice to become the new controller of the barn. Though again, that whole explanation about love has to be the ingredient in making the barn work just seemed a little too schmaltzy for me. But yeah, that's Haven. You got to kind of roll with it. It still makes more sense than when anything done Under the Dome did, but yeah.
I guess. And with that, we're moving into the last episode and the ending.
Yep.
And what really happens there is that Croatoan, at first they try to fool Croatoan to where they can put him in a barn. And Dwight Croatoan has brought back his daughter. And he says to Dwight that give me the controller or I will take your daughter away again. Yeah. And Dwight agrees. He will give him the controller. And here is one of the parts where I think they messed up a little bit. And that is when Dwight is running for there's this tower, or I don't remember exactly what the building is, but it's some stone. Yeah, and when he ran there, a lot of people are shooting him, and I know that he has a bulletproof vest, but I mean, you don't get immune to bullets by wearing a vest. I mean, some of the bullets should have missed the vest and hit him, or at least when the bullets hit the vest, he should have reacted to them.
Yeah, or knocked off his seat or something like that.
Yeah. Now he runs and the bullets are just like flies bouncing off his body. So that was, I was very afraid that they would mess the whole ending up when I saw that, because that scene was a total waste for me. But anyhow, he runs up to this stone building, and Croatoan comes there, and they bring Vince there, and they say to Croatoan that, we have you. We will keep you in here. Mm-hmm. And it turns out they can't, because is it the ether they need to have, or is it that they need ether to power the barn?
He has to go willingly.
Yeah, and they need the ether to power the barn as well, I think.
Part of that.
Isn't it that the ether is in him? And the one controlling the ether who powers the barn has to be there of his free will.
Yes. Yeah. The free will part is important, which is why he will only agree to go into the barn if Audrey goes with him. So. Yeah.
But then he is out and he brings down this entire ether cloud. And then Audrey says that, okay, I'm going to do what you want me to do. Just put the ether in me.
Yeah.
And I thought she was fooling him again, because if that was, she could power the barn and go without him, without his willingness, but she would be the one powering the barn, and he wouldn't have any say of it.
Mm-hmm.
But then Nathan comes, and all this talk of love and willing to sacrifice and everything like that, and all of a sudden Croatoan has changed his mind, and now he wants to go to the barn.
Yeah, which was kind of like same thing with William. It's kind of like, really? He's been in this void for eons, and he's got this big plan, and he wants to do all this stuff, and now he's going to give that all up just so he can be with his daughter. Like,
yeah,
I know he loves her, and he says all that, but that was just a change of heart that I didn't really buy. But Yeah, you kind of have to go with it. It was,
Yeah. But the sad thing here is that Audrey has to go with him. So, and both she and Nathan realize that this is the only thing that he can do, really.
Yeah.
So after some tears and some goodbyes, she leaves and everything goes back to normal in Haven. The troubles are gone, but they still remembers it.
Yeah.
I thought they would wipe everybody's minds.
No, I'm glad they didn't.
I agree to that as well. Everybody know what happened, and they know Nathan is missing Audrey and everything like that. And I think that was a good ending. And I think there's one point where Nathan says that he's going to fish with Dwight and his daughter.
Yeah.
And he leaves the control of the police station to his deputy.
Yeah.
And he drives off in a car. That is where I think they should have ended this episode and series.
I knew you were going to like that.
Yeah, because after that they make all the wrong decisions. If you ask me, what happens is that he sees a car standing by the roadside. Obviously, something is wrong with the car. He pulls over. There's a woman in the car, and she is having car trouble. Here they could have, which I think they should have if they would persist on having this ending, they should have let it be someone other than an Audrey lookalike. Because I think that if it would have been another woman there, and they would have started talking, and he would have helped her with the car, and then you would have that, okay, these two are going to fall in love, and he is going to move on, and he's going to be okay.
Yeah.
Instead, they are giving us what's her name?
Paige.
I don't remember her name. Paige.
Yep.
I was thinking about Peggy, but that's someone else. And he recognized her as an Audrey lookalike. She has no idea who he is.
Yep.
And as a prologue to the series, we get Vince and Croatone sitting talking in the barn, and they confirm that they confirm that it is Audrey who has gone back to Haven as someone else.
They should have at least left it up for us to decide, right? But
yeah.
I mean, it's obviously her. She looks like her.
Yeah.
Like, we really need to be told that.
Yeah. But what the problem is now is that she doesn't know she's Audrey. Nathan knows she's Audrey. The rest of the town will know that she looks like Audrey. Don't know. They might not know if it is Audrey or if it's not, but they will know that she looks like Audrey. So how is that going to work? What is going to happen? Is everybody going to, Audrey's back? No, what was her name? Paige.
Paige, yeah.
I'm Paige. No, and all this confusion.
She'll probably get her memories
and that's
back.
why I think.
Just like she did all the other
Yeah,
parts.
but then everything is back to normal again, and I think then you lose all the build-up that you had with her having to go back, and they sacrifice their future to save the town, and everything all of that is just wasted then, I think, if that turns out. So I think that either they should have just left him on his way to gone fishing, then we would have assumed that he would have missed her, but eventually life would have gone back to normal again.
Yeah.
Or he could have met someone else, and we wouldn't have known that, okay, he's finding someone else, and it's going to be okay again. Yeah. Now I think the last thing there that messed everything up, I think. So I think they did a good ending, but they overdid it and messed it up in the ending.
Yeah, a little subtlety goes a long way there. I think that scene with Vince and Croton should not have been included. I mean, we knew who it was. We didn't have to be told. Some things should be left up to the audience and imagination. I was okay with it. I would have preferred if Nathan and Audrey had gone into the barn as opposed to Audrey and Croatoan. But I did like the scene where all the troubles were leaving, and you see the trouble coming out of the Edge, whatever his name is, and Nathan. So that was I like that. That was a nice little moment because these characters have been carrying these troubles ever since the series started. So to see them leave them. That was a nice little moment. Like that kind of subtle moment, that's the kind of thing that I like.
Yeah, yeah.
But like you, I was okay with the ending. I think they kind of nailed it to the ground a little too hard. But the other thing that I didn't understand or really like at all was why did Duke come back as a ghost? Like that had nothing to do with anything.
Yeah.
Like a Vincent is it Vincent that the Edge's character?
Dwight.
I don't know why I
Dwight.
can't remember his name. Dwight. He didn't need Duke to tell him that if he had faith, he could keep his daughter. Like that could have been handled differently.
Yeah.
So yeah, again, they're just doing kind of fan service there to show Duke coming back as a ghost. Like I didn't hate. I'm not trying to sound too down on it. I mean, it was clunky. But I mean, that's because that's the way Haven is. But I wasn't really happy with how Duke's sacrifice really seemed to turn out to be for naught. Sort of like Dave's. It just sort of felt like they knew that somebody had to pay a price, but I just wish it was a price that actually had ended up meaning something in the grand scheme of things. Yeah. And, but overall, it might have not been the prettiest landing, but it was a satisfying ending. Maybe a little too overdone, but I think what really saves it is that final speech that Audrey gave to Duke to sacrifice himself, even though I don't think the sacrifice actually ended up being anything. Like you, I thought that was probably the last most powerful moment in the series. So,
yeah.
So overall, I appreciate they tied up a lot of loose ends, and I'm glad that they didn't set it up for too much of a potential, sequel. Though I guess you could say they might have a sequel with Duke and Paige, or Nathan and Paige, but. It's not so blatant as Under the Dome's open ending was. So, yeah, I'd probably give it like a 7. I think for the final season.
I agree.
Just a little clunky along the way, unnecessarily. But that's kind of been Haven all the way through, so you can't really ask them to change now. But if they could have elevated their writing and trusted the audience a little more, and not been a little, like you said, so obvious about the ending, that would have worked better for me.
Yeah, and I think they wanted everybody to end on a good note. I think, and you know me, I don't want good notes at the ending.
Well,
no, but it's still if you're gonna die in a good way, you could come back as a ghost and give your friend some good advice.
Yeah.
And then not being selfish to stay along yourself. So I mean, it was sad for him that he died, but it all turned out good at the ending. I mean, they could have not brought him back as a ghost, and then we would have that feeling that he sacrificed himself, but did he really have to?
Yeah.
We didn't have to. Everything didn't have to end perfect between Paige and Nathan, or Audrey and Nathan. They could have been separated. It could have been a sad moment, but then we could have known that he's going to be okay, or as okay as he can be.
Yep.
So I mean, would still have been a good ending, a feel good ending, but not a cheesy feel good ending, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean. Yep.
I think they overdid it by trying to make everybody's endings as good as possible.
Yeah,
I think. But as you say, it was a satisfying ending, and I can live with it. It won't go down in history books, but it works as an ending, I think. And
I think Dave and Vince got their just rewards.
Yeah, I think so.
Those two guys were so irritating the last season and a half.
Yeah.
And I kept on waiting for Dave to come back in the last couple of episodes. I said, somehow he's going to come back. But he never did. I was really surprised. So.
Yeah, I was thinking that he and Croatoan and Vincent could have been locked up in the barn and gone on each other's nerves for eternity.
Exactly. So there you go, folks. That's our thoughts on the finale for Haven. That means there's no regularly scheduled Stephen King series on TV anymore, even though we are getting 11/22/63 next February, but that's a short run series. And then after that, it's going to be quiet time until we get the Bill Hodges book next year. So yeah, we're going to have to talk about that in our next podcast.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So send in your thoughts about the ending of Haven. Some of you did on Facebook, and I think most of you were pretty happy with how it ended.
Yep.
So it seems like an ending that most people can buy, even though we might have some objections. But overall, a good job. And with that, we are done for this time, right?
Yes.
Yes. And in the next podcast, we will take a look back into the past and see what happened in 2015, what we got book-wise and movie-wise and TV-wise, and maybe we will pick some of our favorite moments from 2015 and see what that could have been. And we will also look a little bit ahead and see what we know for 2016 and what we can expect from Stephen King during that year. And the big 20 years celebration of Lilja's library next year as well.
Yeah.
Woohoo! Yeah.
Good stuff.
Should be fun.
Yes, and we're also tentatively looking at some guests. We're going to have one podcast with a podcast team from another person I know who runs Barren Space Productions. He's going to be doing an 11/22/63 podcast, and the host from that will be doing interviews with the cast and members. So we're going to have them on to help them set up that podcast up.
Yes, we hope you all had a great 2015. We sure had. And we're looking forward to 2016 with lots of more podcast and Stephen King stuff to talk about. And yes, until next time, you have a good New Year's Eve.
Same to you, Hans. And Happy New Year's to all our listeners. And remember, stay safe. And Hans is also looking at something also very interesting.
Am I?